Thank you. Good evening. The hour being 7 p.m. on Monday, May 16th. I'd like to call to order City of Laconia City Council Special Budget Meeting. Prior to us going any farther, I'd like to ask Councilor Haynes if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. Joining us this evening is Katie Gargano, the Laconia City Clerk. I ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Littman,
Here.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Felch,
Here. And I'm here.
Counselor Mayor Hausmer.
Thank you. Counselor Hamel is out of state, cannot be with us, will not be joining us. We're also joined by City Manager Scott Myers, as well as City Finance Director Glenn Smith handling the IT this evening. Moving on to item 6, which will be under presentations and with department budget presentation, the planning. In codes departments, I'd ask Dean Trefethen, the director, to lead us through a presentation. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, city manager. The 2023 proposed budget for planning and code enforcement is, as you can expect, a little bit up from last year, but not significantly. Our function and challenges remain the same. I did leave a handout on your desk, and if you want to follow along or up on the screen, either way. We'll start off with code
What if
enforcement.
we blow up the screen there just a bit, if we can? Not that we
I
can.
don't know if we can, maybe.
Yeah, oh, okay,
You have your handout though. if you-
good. Thank you. Yes.
Code enforcement is covered by pages 37 through 40 in your budget book. Proposed budget is just over 188,000. Code is 3 full-time employees, not including myself. It's a building inspector, a housing inspector, and an administrative assistant, which is vacant at the moment. We are suffering the same fate that many places of employment have right now in trying to find help. And I will put the pitch in, and we are looking, and we are willing and ready to train. We're just looking for someone who's got a willingness to learn and has some enthusiasm. So give us a call. Code department activities include building permits, electrical permits, demolition, and occupancy permits, among a few other things, and of course, code inspections. We did a total of more than 1,500 last year, which is approximately the same number as we did the year before. The permit value is a little over 48 million, which was a 24% increase over 2020. We'd have some significant construction projects that are either underway or about to start, which I will get into a little bit later on during the planning portion of this. So we can expect I think we can expect the construction value that we've been experiencing the past couple of years to continue. And this is based on just what we're seeing right now. Who knows what the economy is going to do 3 months from now, 6 months from now, but at the moment, things remain very robust. Code department also supports the Heritage Commission and the Building Code Board of Appeals. Another important function of the code department is the property maintenance part of it. This is junk and trash at our residences. These are buildings that are in poor condition, major paint peeling. We're not talking about a few little spots on the side of the building. We're talking about, you know which ones I'm talking about, but the buildings have probably no paint left on them right now and that kind of thing. They have broken down steps and other significant things going on inside usually. So it's a combination of factors there. We inspect properties by complaint, which is the major part of it. We also do some driving around the city and just to see what we can see as we drive around. We do enforcement through letters, violations, and eventually, if we have to, go to court. We have a couple of cases that are before our lawyers at the moment that will be probably heading to court if we don't get some resolution. They're that one step higher than, that fear of God, I guess, is the last step, but we're at the bottom. And then when the lawyers get involved, people start paying attention, I guess. The other thing is the housing inspector is responsible for our short-term lodging permit inspections. He also acts as a backup to the building inspector, and I will talk about short-term rentals a little bit more, a little bit further in the presentation. So that sums up code for the moment. Any questions on the code department? All right, moving right along to conservation. Page 41 through 44 in your budget book.
Sorry about that. We've got
I'm
something.
sorry, but I should have spoken sooner. You mentioned the code enforcement and they drive around, whatever. Do they ever work on weekends?
Generally, no. I mean, we have a few occasions during the year, motorcycle week, and maybe a few other special things where we might be out inspecting some things, but generally speaking, no.
I would, it would be my suggestion that a little more regularly on the weekend, because you drive around and you see these yard sales, some of them more flagrant than others, that they do them on the weekends because they know we're not coming around to look. So
That could be. I mean, we do have, a couple of employees that live in town and they are now out and about and, they don't turn their eyes off just because they're off the clock. If they see something during the weekend, they follow up with it usually, the following Monday type thing.
I hope you can find a way to maybe have additional time.
We'll formalize that a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Moving on to conservation. Nope.
I was just checking some math there.
Okay. We good?
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Okay, right ahead.
Conservation is page 41 through 44 in the budget book. Proposed budget is $3,500, which is a little bit less than previous years. We have cut a few little minor line items like postage and telephone and a few things that really don't ever seem to get spent in this area. That money is mostly to support the activities of the Conservation Commission. Their biggest expenditure during the course of the year usually is the people that are at the boat ramps, and they have people that inspect the boats for various plants and other things to make sure they're clean when they go in the water and they don't have stuff on them when they come out of the water. They are responsible for reviewing plans for stormwater maintenance, wetlands protection, and protecting our lakes and our tributaries. We have a conservation technician whose salary is paid out of the planning department budget, takes erosion control advice and inspections to the various construction sites. The milfoil dollars that we spend every year for eradication primarily has been in Paugus Bay, but there are a couple other spots where it goes, is a combination of money from grants from DES, from the city, and fundraising that some organizations do around Paugus Bay and also OPG Lake.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go right ahead.
No, for Paugus Bay, because I know the water department has significant money there.
Yes.
Also, the DES does significant work in Paugus Bay.
Yeah.
Are we duplicating something here?
No, we're doing it in conjunction with them. It is a group effort. The money that's being spent, particularly on milfoil, is a coordinated effort that we start in like November of the previous year, start lining up the grants, figuring out where it's going to be done. And then we're in cooperation with DES and the Water Department in our efforts so that we are doing it controlled and we are doing it, focused in the areas that need it. At the
Pargas Bay
moment.
is a state property. And they have control over that.
Right.
It's a state waterway.
Right.
And I know we had this discussion at the Water Commission. That's the reason why I was asking the questions. And, it's not the amount of money. I just want to make sure we're not overlapping each other yet.
No, we are completely in cooperation with the entities.
Thank you.
Counselor Haynes.
Dean, it's, what other activities? I mean, is it just Pargas? Is there any activity in Winnisquam at all?
There is, but we are not contributing any money to that. There is a pretty strong, the Winnisquam Association is pretty strong and they do some fundraising. They do get grants from DES as well, but we don't have any, we talk with them. The Conservation Commission is in touch with them. We have suggestions for them from time to time of places to look at. But we're not directly involved with Winnisquam.
We do make a contribution though, because it is directly to them. So I think it's, I want to say 7,000 or 7,500 of our milfoil money, but that is a very strong organization, as Dean said, and I believe they're getting contributions from Samperton, Meredith, Tilton, as well as Laconia, Belmont, maybe not Tilton, but Belmont probably. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions on conservation? All right. Moving on to the Heritage Commission. Page 25, it's under the administration special items. Their budget is $750. It's been the same for many, many years. Their task, of course, is to recognize and protect historical, cultural, and aesthetic structures that are of community significance, and they are delegated the function to oversee the demolition permits. As you know, the way the demolition permit ordinance is written, it is, to say it doesn't have any, doesn't have a lot of teeth would be an understatement. It really relies on cooperation of the property owners when they identify a property that they would like to save or like to try to save. Quite frankly, we don't get a lot of cooperation from property owners. I'm sure that's not a surprise to anybody. So, I mean, there is a little bit of frustration with the commission from that standpoint. And during the course of this year, probably towards the end of the summer, or early fall, we would like to present some possible suggestions of changes to the ordinance. That would be coming directly to the council, as they're under their own separate chapter under the charter, city charter and ordinances. They're not through the planning board or anything like that. So this would come directly to you. So just to let you know that there is that frustration there, and that frustration is not anything new, but we do have a couple of proposed changes that one of them we need to flesh out a little bit with legal to see exactly what we can and cannot do under state law, et cetera. So that'll be coming your way.
Hold on one second.
Sure.
So Dean, we had at one point had a presentation on the downtown historic district, and they were going to come back and we were going to see some rewrite. Where do we stand with that?
I think Dean's made some efforts to reach out to that committee to try to schedule some meetings. And I think it's just gotten tied up with some of those members serving on other committees where we've been focusing on public works and trash collection and those types of things. So I think that's fallen through the cracks a little bit, but it's not from Dean's lack of asking to get a committee meeting scheduled, because I've been copied on those emails several times.
I have a
Go right ahead.
follow-up question that I didn't get out fast enough on the conservation.
Sure.
We have through current use accumulate a pot of money that can be used to preserve land. Where do we stand with that?
I don't know off the top of my head what the dollar amount that's in that pot of money right now. We did do a fairly major purchase 2.5 years ago.
Right.
So I don't think it's a lot, but it is building up. We have had a few pieces of land that have come out of current use that have, paid their penalties. The Conservation Commission is in contact with a couple of property owners to talk to them about potential of either buying property or purchasing an easement, which is cheaper than buying the property outright, but doesn't give you maybe that 100% control that you might want to have. So they are talking with a couple of landowners to see if they can get some additional land that would be under some type of a conservation either easement or control.
It was that Pickerel Pond parcel that we acquired
Right.
2 or 3 years ago, somewhere in there. So
And we did spend some money on a small parking lot. Actually, DPW did that gratis. But we did buy a sign and, did a little bit of cleanup up there that we did spend some additional money on over and above the purchase price. But so we are looking for properties. We're the low bidder on almost any piece of property that's out there. So, we
Go ahead, Council.
If I might, Mayor, I have some personal experience with this. My wife and I, a few years ago, looked into giving the city an easement to our, or whatever it is, to our property. Where we balked was, and everything was going fine. The commission came out, walked the land with us. And then we found out that, and this is a statutory issue, it's not something that the Conservation Commission or the Planning Department or anybody else does. There's a statutory requirement that the city find a assessor. And we have to accept that assessment. If we don't, we have to pay for the assessor, which for 55 acres was not going to be inexpensive. So, I mean, I think that may be a problem we ought to look at on the long term about how to get the state to ease up on that. I mean, I don't think the city should be forced to accept somebody else's appraiser, but maybe there ought to be 2 appraisers, one for the owner and one for the city, who can then talk about what the property is worth. But to say either you take our appraisal of your property or you pay the appraiser killed me.
Right.
Killed me. And I guess the point I was trying to make in to follow up on Dean's point, I think that makes it hard for a lot of property owners to get too deeply into this. I mean, even if they want their land in land use or an easement for people to travel their land, it's kind of hard when A, you're low bidder, as he suggested, and B, if it's so low that the person doesn't want to accept it, then they're stuck with the cost of it. And that just didn't seem fair to me. So.
Moving on to the Historic District Commission, again, page 25 under Administration Special Items, their proposed budget is $3,000. Their function is to oversee protection of the historic buildings that are in the overlay district. The overlay district is very limited at this moment. It consists of 5 different properties. As you know, the Historic District Commission has proposed an expansion of the district based on a study done by a May Williams, who some of you may or may not know. She's a very highly recognized person in the state that has categorized, cataloged, and studied all of the buildings within a defined area of the downtown, including things like the parking garage, and she has her assessment of that as well. And that was the basis for the historic, the expanded district that was before you several months ago, which is on hold. And as the city manager alluded to, we're had started discussions recently with the Government Operations and Ordinance Committee, and those will continue when we can free up the time to do that. Meanwhile, they are meeting and they are creating some educational pamphlets that they hope to use in the schools. They did a business canvas downtown where they talked to as many business operators, and in some cases, the building owners, as they could as they were going around, and depending on who was in the building at the time. But they did get to talk to a significant number of business operators in the downtown area to explain what it is that they were trying to do. And I think they thought that it was successful in answering some questions and concerns and apparitions that some people may have had about the proposal. Certainly not 100% agreement, but a little bit better reception. Any questions on Historic District Commission?
Council,
I didn't want to miss one.
of course not. At least you're on time.
Was this the commission's request or what you proposed? The dollar amount?
The dollar amount was a little bit more than that, and in the process of negotiations, your friend to your right reduced it down a little bit.
Could you tell me what the original figure was?
I believe it was 4.
On page 25.
45.
4,500.
45.
So you can see they requested 4,500. They never had any money. They
Right.
never had any money before. The request was 4,500 and the amount that proposed to be funded for them is 3,000.
We could do carryover if we thought we might have some expenditures that might go over that.
I think we found the money somewhere within the budget for hiring May Williams, right? So that funding was not part of it, but I want to say that was,
Came out of my budget.
okay, there we go. I found it a good spot.
Didn't they go out and get a line of credit also?
Line of credit.
Didn't they do something, is it that or a different commission?
Oh, that's the Historical Society.
Historical Society, okay.
All right.
Oh, they were moving their building. That's
Right.
why they.
Yes.
Yes.
Or looking to,
Hmm?
or looking to.
Yes.
All right, moving on to planning and community development, page 73 through 78 in your budget book. Proposed budget is just under 323,000, which is about a $23,000 increase from last year. 5 full-time employees, including myself. We just hired a new zoning technician just last week. So that position was vacant for about a month or so. We actually did pretty good on that position, I think, in terms of being able to find a hopefully very qualified person who can step right into that. Planning department activities, support boards and commissions. We have planning, zoning board, conservation commission, technical review committee, the minor site plan. We have special events, motorcycle week, and the historic district. Primary purpose or primary function, primary tasks that we do on a regular basis is advise property owners about the regulations as they come in and ask questions, zoning, density, signs, wetlands. It has been the past 2 years has been very busy from, we've had major developers doing major projects, which I will talk about in just a sec. But we've also had a very busy Johnny homeowner type construction couple of years where people have been adding decks and porches and additions and garages, et cetera. Most of them know nothing about zoning. I don't expect them to, because they'll never have to probably do this again. So we do advise them and let them know what they can and cannot do and how to go about it. And when they need some help from, say, the zoning board or something like that, we help them with that process as well. Potential development and redevelopment opportunities in the city are very varied. We have the former state school property that is on the market. last I checked with the gentleman at CBRE, there were over 35 inquiries. And that was a few weeks ago. So expect that number is higher now. We, from a city planning department standpoint, have had contact with 2 or 3 developers over the course of the past year or so that are very interested in the property. And I know at least one of them has put in a proposal. Whether the others have or not, I don't know, but hopefully they have. 2021 was a very robust construction season, a $48 million value, which was about a 24% increase over the previous year. We have had a very steady 2022 start. Prices of construction materials are still high, historically speaking, but have started, some things anyway, have started to come down in price a little bit. And then we keep running into very unusual shortages. And you just never know. It varies from month to month, but last month it was, nobody could get the little plastic electrical boxes that you put in the wall for your outlets or your receptacles. They just were not available, and now they are. And 2 months ago it was windows. So, you just don't know. But people are still putting in for building permits. We do have some very large projects starting soon or continuing. Continuing includes the Elm Street project, what we call the Barton's Motel redevelopment. I never can remember the exact name of, it's the Outlook at Paugus Bay or something along that line. But anyway, they are getting ready to do certificate of occupancies on the first building. And Lilac Valley, which is split between Province Road and Old Prescott Hill Road. They are on to their next phase off of Prescott Hill Road right now. Altogether, that is 90 something units of they are all rental at the moment. But they are all aimed at a moderate price. I hesitate to use the term inexpensive or cheap because there is no such thing when it comes to rentals right now. But compared to some of the other rental fees that are out there, they are fairly reasonable. These are approximately 900 square foot, predominantly 2-bedroom ranch houses. Great starter homes, although they're not being sold at the moment, but they could be at any time. It's the way it's approved. Projects that are starting very shortly. And on one of these, you'll say, yeah, we've heard this before, but I think it's really going to happen. But anyway, the gardens at Endicott Street, gardens at Winnipesaukee, which is on Endicott Street East, just above the bumper boats. They should be in the ground within a month. Paugus Woods, which is off of White Oaks Road. The development has been there for 13 years. The final phase, which is an additional 40 something units, they have started clearing land. So we have a pre-construction meeting with them tomorrow. They will be underway very shortly, and that is associated with the Langley Cove project, which we have been assured is going to start this spring or summer. And Province Street is a proposal for a 90-unit apartment complex. And then we have the Lookout, which just started construction up on top of the hill in Weirs Beach, next to the Cumberland Farms. They have just started and they are going gangbusters.
What's that?
We will have a lot of new housing potentially
Council,
coming.
just a question.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry about
What
that.
is the size of the development next to the Cumberland Farms going to be?
That is 49 units, condominiums, for sale condominiums. They are a combination of 2 and 3 bedroom units, is mostly 2-bedroom, but there are probably out of the 49 units, I would say 16 maybe are 3-bedroom units. They will have a clubhouse, and the way they have tiered the project, the way the project, the land slopes down towards the Veterans Association property, they're going to have, every unit is designed to have a view of the lake and the mountains.
Looks like a nice unit. I've seen pictures.
Yeah, I mean, they're,
Townhouse style.
yeah, townhouse style. They won't be cheap. Langley Cove is 291 units. They will not be building all of them, obviously, super quick, but the indication from them is that they would be doing in the order of 30 this year, assuming they actually start when they say they're going to start, and they've been telling us now for 3 years that they're going to start any day now, but and the gardens on Endicott Street is 87 condominium units, mostly 2-bedroom. Most of them are standalone units, but there are a few duplexes in there. So we potentially have a lot of units of housing coming online of various price points over the course of the next year or so. I would not, other than Lilac Valley, I would not characterize any of them as starter homes or workforce housing or affordable housing. They're going to be a little more, expensive than that, unfortunately. But with the price of materials and everything today, it's very, very difficult to do a low-cost house. It's just the way it is. One of the major activities that we have going on in the planning department is implementing the recommendations continuing of the 2018 Land Use Master Plan chapter. We also are working to update some other chapters of the master plan. We have an economic chapter that's about half written right now. We have a natural resources chapter that is in draft form and is going to the planning board for their review. That should be adopted soon. And we have in the office, we have created a bullet list of things that we want to cover with our facilities chapter. This will be, where we stand with our police, fire, DPW facilities. We'll be reaching out to the various department heads to give us what their long-range plans and hopes and aspirations are. There will be a fallout of, to some degree, of the capital improvements plan that we do every year. I want to take a quick moment. Master Plan Steering Committee is continuing to meet. We have a couple of zoning changes that will be coming to the council in a couple of months that are in before the planning board at the moment. Urban commercial zone and the performance zoning district that we have created 3 years ago have been working out, from my perspective anyway, or my opinion anyway, has been working out very well. And last year we did expand the performance zoning to include and most of the Weirs Beach area. And there is a couple of opportunities that we are aware of for folks to use performance zoning in the Weirs for a couple of properties that are the drive-in, for instance. We all know, everybody knows the drive-in is on the market. They have had several people recently looking at that. And there's a couple other properties in the immediate concentrated Weirs area that people are looking at. The short-term rental issue has not gone away. We have processed a little over 100 permits. Some of them have not finished. Some of them were withdrawn and for various reasons. We have about 90 permits that have been issued. At some point in time, I know we all have a busy schedule and a lot on our plate. At some point in time, I'd like to get in front again of the Ordinance and Government Operations Committee to discuss some updates to the short-term rental ordinance. We kind of got put on hold with the issue because of action by the legislature where they were talking about taking enforcement control out of our hands. And that kind of got modulated a little bit as it went along, but what did they do with it? ITL it?
Moved it to interim study, which is a polite way of killing it for the year.
So I think we need to get back to, we were discussing, before that issue came up with the legislature, we were discussing with a couple of different companies that help with enforcement. So I think we need to get back to that now that the issue is at least settled for a year or more, and see what we can do about that. We are, every time we do an assessment, the number, it keeps going up, but the number of properties that are listed for short-term rentals in the city is in the high 200s to low 300s. I think a lot of it depends on time of year and that kind of thing. Some of those are motels that are just using the various platforms as a marketing tool to try to fill their rooms. So it's not 100% just individual properties, but certainly the number is somewhere close to 300 of properties that are doing it. And like I say, we have 90 permits out there, some of which are coming around for their renewal, that they were the ones, some of the ones that did it 2 years ago when we first enacted the ordinance, and they're coming up for renewal. So we're dealing with that. But so we do have a ways to go in terms of getting everybody on an equal footing from the standpoint of having a permit. I will say that since we have enacted the ordinance, where we do a very basic inspection and we educate the property owner about what our expectations are concerning trash and noise and parking, which those are the primary drivers of complaints. For the people who have a permit, we have not had one single complaint from an abutter about a short-term rental in the properties that have permits. So I think the idea of the educational process that we go through with the property owner and the fact that they know that their permit is based on them, operating correctly and being good neighbors is very effective. All of the complaints that we get about short-term rental are on properties that do not have permits. And that's one of the primary ways that we find out about some of the properties that are doing short-term rental.
So Dean, I hope that you push this short-term rental monitoring as fast as you can. I think we owe it to the folks who have done it correctly, and those that are now coming up for renewal. They're the ones that are, they're following what we would like them to follow, what we require them to follow. Yet it's the others that sort of burn me, that just don't comply at all. So, the idea of hiring this out to monitor, we're probably at the point now where if only a third of our short-term rentals are actually registering, the cost associated with hiring an outside vendor to monitor it, I think would probably be more than made up for with the fees that we could collect from them, correct?
Good, yes, yeah.
And we have interviewed, Dean and his team have interviewed a couple of firms that do this. Again, I think this whole thing about the legislation of Senate Bill, what 429 was it, that was going to allow it in every neighborhood and limit our ability to inspect, kind of just caused us to put the brakes on a little bit, so we weren't wasting time on something that we may turn out to be out of our control.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the planning and zoning side of things?
Didn't want to support. Dean, I'm looking here at the director's salary. And I saw a note in here somewhere that said, as a planning director, 70% of your wages is from the planning department and 30% is from code enforcement.
Yes.
My math says that 70% of 71,800, and not why I didn't put the 800 in there, was 49.7.
Are you looking at it right here? Yeah, I understand, but this is the 70% of the total. This
Yeah.
70% of the total equals that number.
That is the 70%.
So this here is 70% of his
Well-
total salary.
Okay, I thought I read.
Scott, what is that?
The salary is represented in the department, so 70% in the planning budget and 30% in the code budget.
Okay.
It says right here. Okay, so if 70% is in the planning department and 30% is in the code enforcement, the number is still the same. 49,700 is what we're paying our planning director.
No.
70,000 plus another
I understand that, but
30,000.
what I'm saying, just for the
Okay.
sake of discussion, we
Why?
separate those two jobs.
Why?
We're gonna pay somebody 30,000 and we're gonna pay somebody 49,000.
No, the total's over 100,000. That 70,000 is the 70%.
Use your microphone. So just the background on this, so when I first arrived in the city, we had a vacant building inspector position, and that person acted as the department head for that 3-person department. And looking at the overlap and how interrelated in the open work area down there, through decision, my recommendation in the council that time, we created one department head that oversaw both functions down there as opposed to having 2 department heads. So that was created probably in about 2012 or 2013. And based on what we look at with, how Dean performs his job, he's identified that 70% of his time is spent on planning related functions and 30% on the code. And we never had a building inspector position until just recently. It was an assistant building inspector. And then with the workload and the volume of projects and just the competitive nature of the market, that's the position that you adjusted 2 or 3 months ago back to a building inspector, just based solely on the volume and the responsibility, the more complexity. So, and also so that we can keep competitive in the job market. But collectively, the salary is the $100,000 range, but it's split over 2 functions. Really no different than the finance director oversees IT and welfare as well.
I'm fine. What I was trying to make sure is we were paying them enough. I apologize for the.
The answer is no, Councilor.
There goes the budget.
Oh, man. Don't put him on my negotiating team.
I'm satisfied with what I'm making, Councilor
And
Cheney,
I
and
appreciate that. The question when I read this and read this concerned me.
yeah. So, but to your point, and this should not be a surprise to anyone. I mean, if you wanted to split the 2 functions, again, it would be substantially more because you just.
So I think,
You'd end up paying almost the same amount to a future planning director as you're paying me for both, and then you got to turn around and do a code enforcement.
so I
which is
think going
difficult to
forward
find.
on this, on the code enforcement, I don't think there's a salary detail like there is on the planning department. At least I couldn't put my finger on it because
Go to page 70,
Yeah,
74, and then page 30.
on page 30, what?
37.
38.
38. Oh, there it is. Got it.
Okay.
I couldn't find that second one. Got it. Perfect.
I'm glad there's 2 of us. I thank you. I wasn't, please understand, I wasn't,
But thank you for my negotiating leverage with the city manager.
That's only one council, sir.
I think you'll be taking that up with the new city manager sometime post-September.
No, my performance review is up in July. I think you're still here. All
Thanks, Counselor.
Thanks, Dean.
right, thank you.
Yes. Anybody else is looking for a raise tonight now might be the. I think you've softened Cheney up pretty good right now. and He's feeling generous.
I find it hard to believe many of them are overpaid.
All right. Moving on to item number 6B.
Kind of like good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, kind of like.
Chief Biatti's here from the Laconia Fire Department. Welcome.
Now,
How about salaries?
Oh, you're the good cop. right
that's what I'm
now.
saying. Now, my career was bad cop.
You know what role I'm playing.
What's that?
We know what role I'm playing.
Where the hell is the fire department?
60.
I knew that.
Everybody understand, I take drugs.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Well, good evening. Welcome.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. With me tonight is Assistant Chief Jay Ellingson, Deputy Chief Jason Bean. The majority of what you'll see for the presentation tonight is a recap of 2021, and then we'll move into the calendar year 21, and then we'll move into the next fiscal year appropriations. And a lot of the material you should have received at some point in the annual report that came out that I got you guys a few months ago. I want to start off by a couple of thank yous. Certainly want to thank Scott and Glenn for all their work during our budget presentation, our preparation. Certainly we start this back in November and we work with them closely from that point forward. Thank you to you, Mayor Hosmer, and the council for everything you do for us during the year. I want to thank my administrative staff. Two are here. Deputy Chief Charles Raffo is also one of my administrative staff who, as you've seen, if you haven't heard, he'd be retiring at the end of June. Going to be a big loss for us. And I want to thank all the members of Laconia Fire Department for everything they do on a daily basis. And I'm not just saying that because it's EMS week this week, which is proclaimed. So this is a perfect time to be standing here. But, you know, in all seriousness, I'm always amazed at everything they do on a daily basis. It's been a while since I've been out on the floor running on calls all the time. And to see the changes that they've had to go through over the last few years, it's pretty amazing what they do. And I want to make sure we stand up here and say that right from the beginning. During the year, we've had multiple personnel changes. We had 3 retirements. We had 5 members depart. A couple of them went to other departments. One did leave for some personal reasons. And then we had a litany of new members come on as well. With the personnel changes, we've done a lot with recruitment and retention. And I'll mention this later on as we go through this, but we've been working really hard at this. I know I've come before you at different times with some policy changes that this council has done. Everything we do is a little bit of a building block. We have spent time, we formed an internal committee for recruitment and retention. It has a couple members of the department on it. A couple of the chief officers serve on it. And they literally go out and we're actively recruiting new members. The physical agility test that's required to be a career firefighter in New Hampshire, they host that 4 times a year. 3 of the times during of those 4, it's hosted right here in Laconia at the ice arena. So we started going down and actively recruiting people. They come out of the physical agility test. They're done. They're happy. They got their certificate. We're going, hey, you want a job? The negative side of that is last time I went down, and I think Deputy Bean would agree to this. I went down just to check things out to see how they were going. I think there was more fire chiefs there than there were candidates, but you know, we're doing well with that. I serve on an ad hoc committee that was formed by Commissioner Quinn from the Department of Safety, dealing with recruitment and retention statewide, which the committee is very diverse. There's private industry, there's state agencies, there's fire department. It's not any one agency, and it's working really well. We'll be presenting our findings to Commissioner Quinn for eventual presentation to Governor Sununu at the end of June. And certainly, you know, everything we've been doing piece by piece, working with you as the council, things you've helped us approve, the sign-on incentives, the starting people at different rates, you know, just supporting us with our personnel increasing. All this stuff adds up. It's building blocks. We've said from day one, when we recognized that there was a problem, that this is the time. If you want to be a full-time firefighter right now, you go get your certifications. You're going to be able to stand out in the middle of the street and say, hey, who wants me? And you're going to get a job. So we have to be active. We have to be creative sometimes. And you all have supported us in doing that. And certainly the members of the department that have been working on these committees have been as well. So we're moving along and we're seeing changes. We continue to send firefighters to paramedic school. We have one that has just, firefighter priest has just passed his test for the class. He's got a couple little administrative things to do, and he'll be able to take his national registry. So within the next probably month, he'll be a licensed paramedic, which is outstanding. We have another one that'll complete in the fall. I have 2 listed here that will start in May. But they're actually going to be starting late summer, early fall. Just it was an issue with the school. It wasn't anything on our part. And we'll continue to do this with the passage of the new budget. This is another one of those being creative, being smart funding opportunities for us. We have firefighters that come in every day when they interview with us, and they'll say, "Where do you see yourself?" And they'll say, "Well, I really want to go to paramedic school." Well, we're able to sit there. These guys who do the interviews are able to sit there and go, "Well, have we got a plan for you?" And they get excited about that. They go, "Oh, so I finished my probation. I get to do this, and there's a chance that someone's going to help pay for me to go to school." Yes, they love it. Not everybody's doing that. So that's really big for us, and it's something that we couldn't do without all your support. In 21, we had 2 well, it's 4. These are the first 2 performance recognitions that I would just like to mention. On April 7th, we had a fire up on Highland Street that unfortunately was, we lost the life of a civilian. But these members listed here were part of the rescue that went in to get her out. And we recognized them in a ceremony this year for their hard work. Less than a week later, the same shift went to a fire on Mesa Street. Sounded like it was going to be a minor fire. They got inside. They had nothing actually showing from the outside when they got there. They got inside. They started to go up the stairwell, and they had one apartment fully involved, and they couldn't see through the hallway. As they made the top of the stairs, the people in the neighboring apartment came out into the blinding smoke and were essentially trapped. These 2 firefighters here pulled them out, got them to safety, quickly treated them, and they were able to be released a short time later. So these crews were recognized for that. The other 2 recognitions that I want to talk about, we always talk about mutual aid and how well it works around here, but do we really give a lot of examples? I know, we had different fires through the years where you see a lot of mutual aid show up. These are 2 incidents that have nothing to do with building fires that we had a lot of help from this year. And both of which, again, we recognized everybody that was involved. The Wednesday night of Bike Week, we had the multiple gas odor calls throughout the city. It ended up being an overpressurization of the odorant that makes the gas smell. But we didn't know that. So we did about 70 gas-related incidents in a day and a half. We had mutual aid companies in from our surrounding communities that were taking calls all throughout the city. We actually had a mutual aid chief running the incident command at the hospital until one of us could show up because we were tied up at another one. Great example of how this works. August 12th, we went out for a water rescue call in Paugus Bay. I was in a meeting in my office, so I was kind of listening. Sounded like it was going to be an incident that was probably going to be drawn out, so I responded. I got to about McDonald's and I heard the PD sending crews to Ahern State Park for a water rescue. First thing that popped into my head is, oh no, they sent us to the wrong place the first time. Got on scene, met with these guys. They said, no, we're confirmed. This is legitimate incident here at Paugus Bay. Turned around, I responded over to Ahern with Guilford, Belmont, Stewart's Ambulance, and Lake Street Mutual Fire Aid, the 2 chief officers from Lake Street Mutual Fire Aid, and me. I was the only Laconia person there. Everybody else was mutual aid. We were able to make the rescue out of that one, and that person walked out of the hospital a couple of days later. Would not have happened without the mutual aid that we have. So I think it was worth taking a couple minutes out of our time to recognize that our mutual aid system works. It works really, really well. It wouldn't be budget presentation last year if I didn't throw one slide up. It's the only COVID slide, I promise you. Couple of things I want to just mention on here. We did over 1,900 hours last year of vaccinations between the booster blitzes. We did the Laconia School District. We did all the first responders. Chief Bean went out with his vaccine and his little kit and went and did homebound people throughout the city. So overnight, and that was 1,900 hours. It was probably closer to 2,000 when we really sit down and look at it. It was another year of, every time we go on a call, it added, I estimated it added about 30 to 45 minutes per call for the decontamination that we had to do if you had a suspected COVID patient. And our crews, again, it was, I guess they're getting used to it now, unfortunately. But it's a big change in what they do, and they did an outstanding job. The last thing I just want to say on this is, we continue to see outstanding interdepartment cooperation between all the city departments. Our personnel, especially the ones that work on the floor, responding on calls, they work closely. They see DPW all the time. They see police all the time, but they don't always cross paths with maybe the school district. They don't always cross paths with maybe water department or parks. This got everybody talking all the time, working together closely, whether it be about giving equipment or asking questions. We had questions, they had questions. I saw such a great relationship grow between all the departments. We've always had good relationship. This just helped grow that because you started working together so much. And again, I think it was worth noting. Getting into some of the incident responses from last year, we were up. We went down, if you remember, in 2020 because and we believe it to be COVID related. Well, it was, or seemingly anyhow. We increased 434 calls between 20 and 21. So we definitely saw ourselves going back up again. Put us at about, give or take, waiting on one department for their numbers, put us at about eighth busiest department in the state. You'll look under medical rescue, there was also 349 critical patients. So that was one critical patient a day. And critical patient is how we classify someone by the way we put their statuses is if they don't go to the hospital, their outcome is going to be potentially dire or at least very serious. And we're doing about one a day on that, on top of the 3,569 medical calls we had. 2021 ended as our third busiest year ever. And as you can see there, August of 21 was our second busiest month ever. June of 21 is also listed in there as our fourth, but as I said, we did 70 calls just related to one incident. So taking that out, and October 17 was a major storm that came through. So really just straight up call for call. August of 21 was our busiest month ever at over 500 runs. This hasn't really changed our incidents by district. Downtown Central, South Laconia areas, it's always going to be our busiest, where our most population is, where our nursing homes are. So we're going to be as busy there as anywhere else. So really no change to that. Response time analysis, we look for 90% at 8 minutes, meaning we're on scene within 8 minutes of all calls within 90% of the time. Those numbers are down a little bit this year. And they've continued to trend down over the last few years. And a lot of that's just related to multiple calls. If we're tied up, we can only get to a call so fast. And I think the multiple calls are what we're seeing decrease. One question I always get, probably one of the most questions I get, is why do you take a bunch of apparatus to every call you go on? Well, we don't. And actually, if you look here, 64% of the incidents we handled last year was with just one unit. So that's important.
Chief.
I don't know if that.
So, quick question for you in terms of going out of city to transport to Concord or elsewhere. Does that have a factor in your response time analysis?
No, because that response time would be only a time it takes us to get on scene of, so our on scene for that would be the time we leave the station to get to the hospital. So that would not affect that.
So by having staff out of town.
Oh, but I'm sorry. Yeah, yes, that would add. Last year, we did 34 transports outside of Lake Street General Hospital, transfer wise, not leaving. So there's two ways we would go out of town. We would either do a transfer from Concord Hospital Laconia to another hospital, which we did that 34 times last year. So not a whole lot. Or if the patient is critical enough, we would go right from the scene to another hospital, which is going to be 99% of the time would be Concord Hospital, Concord. And I don't have those numbers, but it wasn't a whole lot. It was no more than probably one a month last year. So yes, it does affect some of that, but I don't think it swings it enough. I think it'd be a negligible amount if we weren't gone that many times.
I've been hearing some cries from nursing homes around the state that commercial ambulances have staffing shortages so critical that they're stopping to serve for transfers from nursing homes to hospitals or chair car transports. Have you picked up any of that in Laconia yet?
I would say yes to a small extent. Our nursing homes are still doing pretty well that when they call for us, it is an emergent transport. Is it 100% of the time? No, of course not. But I don't think we've seen the dire problem that maybe some of the other places are seeing. But we do our fair share amount of runs to nursing homes. So at 80% emergent runs, probably 85%, probably a fair.
They're saying the last quarter, I think I had 2 minutes.
So we're not seeing a whole lot. And we went out, this is quite a few years ago now, we'll probably do it again. And we did educating. We went to all the nursing homes and said, this is when you call 911 and this is when, Laconia Fire should be going versus this is when you should call for a private ambulance.
I guess what I'm hearing in other parts of the state is that when they call, no one will come. And so that's because they've abandoned that part of the market.
Yeah. The privates are, ambulance services are having trouble finding employees as well. There's no question. And I think where you're going to see that really ramp up, certainly we have nursing homes that we're going to run into, but at some point, what happens to the hospitals if they can't get those transfer services out? We haven't seen where we're being abused yet. We fall back to what we did when we had the partnership with the hospital, where we were the last resort. You don't call us unless you absolutely have to transfer out. And they've really stayed that way. I think we had one probably a few months ago that they probably went to us too early. We dealt with it at the hospital and we haven't seen that again. So they've been pretty good to us about that.
That's good to hear.
Sorry for this slide. It's really not a very good font slide here, but the point of the slide is two things. One is that what day of the week are you busy? We're the same every day pretty much. But the other one is in small font up top. We consider our night shift 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. We did almost 1,800 runs, or 37% of our calls were after 7 p.m. at night. So we stay busy 24 hours a day. Mutual aid has gone down a little bit. We've cut back on some of our automatic aid. So the two ways we go out of town is either automatic aid. So a community will have a reported fire and we will go automatic with them to the call. And the other one is mutual aid, where they get on scene and they need help. These reflect of both of those, but there's actually a decrease in incidents to Belmont and a decrease in incidents to Guilford because some of the automatic aid has been decreased. We do about a 2-to-1 give mutual aid to what we receive. But we use our mutual aid as automatic aid as well. And, we reach out to Guilford and Belmont, and any reported building fire in the city, they come in automatically. And if it's in the Weirs, it'll actually get Meredith as well. So we work really well with our mutual aid partners. Overdose numbers for last year went back up a little bit. As you can see, they were trending down the 3 years prior to that. They did start to go up again this year a little bit. About 60% were opioid related. We continue to work with, we have 4 recovery coaches still in house. They continue to work with the patients. And those guys also certainly work well with Laconia Police, as all the work that they do with Detective Adams with his pet work, as well as our nonprofits throughout the city that deal with this. Inspections went back up last year. You can see we're around the 12-ish hundred range until 2020 hit. We decreased what we were doing for inspections, and we also decreased, people weren't doing some of the work that we would have to go out and inspect. So, maybe you weren't having the gas fireplace put in, those types of things. But those numbers went right back up this year or last year, and they're continuing to go up. In our health related, we did 116 health related complaints inspections. In our department, Deputy Chief Bean is also the city's health officer, and he deals with all the complaints and inspections that are related to health officer stuff. I talked about the multiple and simultaneous calls. We just missed doing 2,000 runs last year while we were doing another run. any department you ask, I don't know why it is. It's completely anecdotal, but it's completely by chance. For some reason, the departments just get busy when there's a reason why you're getting busy all at once, and sometimes you can't figure out why, but everybody has these same issues, and we certainly are not immune to that. Like I said, we did almost 2,000 calls while another one was occurring last year. We try not to reach out to our mutual aid partners as much as we can. We feel it's our responsibility to handle our incidents within the city. And certainly, you talk about dollars and cents on calls, but when there's revenue with EMS, we try not to be reaching out too often for that as well. I like to do this analysis. I've done it the last couple of years. It's a 5-year analysis on our, this is value versus percent saved for when we're inside fighting a fire. So in the last 5 years, we fought fire in over $20 million worth of building, and we've saved about 70% of that. Now, when I do these numbers, it is not, you have $1 million building, you had a toaster fire. It's not, we saved, all but $10 of $1 million building. We don't, that isn't how it works. These are fires where we go in and are actually stretching hose and fighting fire. The picture I showed at the beginning was the fire on a Union Ave right across from Robbins Auto last year. As an example, that was a $180,000 building, and we saved well over 50% of that building by the work that they did. That's how those numbers play in. Some alternative funding, the grant acceptance and pending. We still have the Assistance to Firefighters grant, which is pending. That's $42,000 for smoke removal fans. I'm trying to change. We have some electric, we have some gas. We're trying to get everything changed over to electric. Still waiting on the staffing for adequate fire and emergency response grant, the SAFER grant. We're still waiting, no answer. I was hoping that'd be my big reveal today. We got, but it's not there yet. We had the Leary Foundation grant for $18,000 for a new gear washer and dryer system. That's been installed and is running as well. I just wanted to, this is the, this is the update on CIP. Engine 5 we know is in service and running well. The Weirs renovation station, even that was a couple of years ago, I wanted to just mention that it's now 100% complete. If you remember when I came here last year, I said we're not quite done yet. Unfortunately, we had a contractor that wasn't able to complete because of the death in the family. And so that is all completed, and they're doing a great job. We ordered last year, supported the utility pickup truck and breathing apparatus. The utility pickup truck is on order. I ordered it in August. So we're still waiting on that, but that's like anybody trying to order right now. And our breathing apparatus, our air packs, that project was completed, and those are all in service, and very, very pleased with them. One of the great selling points of the new air packs is the ergonomics. They just fit well. I don't get a chance to wear an air pack too often anymore. I wore one the other day for about 4 or 5 hours, and I will admit that they did a nice job with the that whole piece of it. So I think they're going to like these for a long time. This year's capital requests, we have a forestry vehicle in there, a new car for our EMS deputy. We have some specialty EMS equipment that is going to, I believe, is going to end up going through the ARPA funding. So those are this year. And some of that specialty EMS equipment, I've talked about it before, but it's just stuff that I couldn't find in the budget to be able to spend, and some higher dollar items. Future capital needs is the replacement of Ladder 2, which I've mentioned for the last few years, as well as a replacement of Engine 2. Ladder 2 is a 1998, Engine 2 is a 1991. And both of them are going to need replacement. The next big ticket items that we replace are going to be those. We also are looking at being able to replace our boat 1. I talked about this at Capitol last year or earlier in the fall. Boat 1 is the boat that's in the Weirs that stays at the Weirs docks by the Mount Washington. Our goal is going to be to replace that, move that boat into Paugus Bay and get a fireboat for the Weirs. I don't have numbers on it yet. We're working on numbers. I actually have formed a committee to basically get to me, what do we need? What is the dollar figure? What does the boat look like? Get some actually hard numbers that we can spec. And then we're going to work on that. We're also working at trying to find some alternative funding for that as well. In the budget book, you'll see that there's a couple of adjustments to the salary and operational side, but really not a whole lot, and with the exception of one piece that's on the next slide. We put money aside in a special line. It's actually under the extra duty line for coverage for off-duty training. One of the things that we find that really is I hate to use this term, but a little bit of out of the box thinking for recruitment of personnel is training money. We do see some departments that do this. We kind of looked at this. This is going to give every on-duty member 16 hours of covered time. So if they find a class that they like, they'll put it through our school committee, which includes the assistant chief and deputy chief. If they approve it, they'll be able to get time off. They'll be able to get covered and be able to go to school. It is a really nice thing to be able to do for them to get out and go training. We've talked about the sign-on incentive, but we've never had a separate line for it. This just adds a little bit of money into a line for that. I added some money for maintenance and station repairs, protective clothing. And then there was actually a decrease of almost $2,000 this year in our Lakes Region Mutual Fire Rate, our dispatch center line. We paid off some capital. There was some reassessments done. So every year it goes up or down a couple percent, percentage here, percentage there. This dropped us almost $2,000 this year. The other big ticket item is the additional 4 firefighter salary for 6 months. My goal is going to be to run that person as a paramedic response unit, fly car, if you will. Again, this is another draw for recruitment and retention. It is not the only reason we would do it. It certainly improves our efficiency coverage. It makes us a little bit more efficient, a little bit more effective in how we move our personnel around and respond to incidents. But what a great recruitment and retention tool when this puts people into it. It's not always the same thing every day. It gives them a little bit of flexibility. It gives them a new kind of take on what they go do every day. And I think it's really pretty neat. I know if I was still on the floor doing this, something like that would be a real draw for me, or if I was looking for a job. Our ambulance EMS special revenue funds, there was no real significant changes this year. And again, I said it at the beginning, but there is money in there to be able to send somebody to paramedic school, and I want to continue to do that. That is all I have. I'm sure you have questions.
Counselors. Counselor Susie.
Thank you, Chief. Good job. But question I have, and this is just maybe more curious than not, is there an ambulance always stationed at the Weirs?
Yes. So not staffed. So what we have in the Weirs is we have the 3 personnel that are up there. When a call comes in, they will take the most appropriate vehicle. If that call happens to be a medical call in the Weirs, they will take the ambulance and respond to the call in the Weirs and the ambulance.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is that, okay, the reason I ask is with more and more development taking place. I mean, and especially from, and I know Councilor Cheney and myself would really trying to look at this thing is between the Weirs and the north end of the city. Okay, I'm concerned about response time, as you said, and response capabilities. Okay, and I'm just wondering if that's something that forward looking we should be really looking at.
The next personnel that we put on will be assigned to downtown. The next personnel after that, and again, looking forward out, is going to end up being in the Weirs to keep more staffing up there at more times. One of the issues that we have with response time to the Weirs is those crews do spend a lot of time downtown, either transporting someone to the hospital or responding to incidents downtown from the Weirs. So there is that delay in that. When we, as an example, when we put extra personnel on for Memorial Day weekend, or obviously for Motorcycle Week, but the big weekends, or maybe a real just hot weekend, that's where we put the additional staffing is up there, because we do know that that is where that growth is. Certainly if we start growing out to the north end, or as the Weirs starts to explode with housing, yeah, that's where the next amount of staffing is the next increase in staffing is going to need to go. Especially, we see a lot of housing going on in the Weirs, and a lot of it is seasonal, but as we all know, seasonal housing could change to permanent housing if people decide to move.
We're a 4-season vacation area now. We're not
Yeah.
season anymore. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Counselor.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Mayor, but I wanted to comment on briefly the chief's comments about a paramedic response unit. When I was at 911, I got introduced to what other agencies call paramedic intercept. And I've talked with the chief about this on more than one occasion. I think this is one of the best ideas he's had he's probably had a lot of good ideas, but this is one of the ones that I can most strongly support. I think paramedic response, once we see it function, will be a part of the agency we want to build on and increase because and I think over the long haul, it may even save us some funds in other areas, which will help pay for it. But I want the chief and the department to know this counselor feels very strongly about his efforts to get this paramedic response unit going. It may help with recruitment, but it will help the citizens of Laconia who need a paramedic to have a paramedic response unit added to the staff of the department. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from counselors? Seeing none, thank you very much,
Thank
Chief.
you. Have a good night.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
Next up, item 6C. Our Finance Department with Glenn Smith. Welcome, Glenn.
That was so good. I just want to leave this presentation up and go through that one again.
Oh, Scott, 60.
You don't have to leave. You don't have to leave.
Who wouldn't want to stay for finance?
You've probably been thrown out of better places than this. Finance, whatever. 27. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This chance to tell you a little bit about what's in the FY23 budget for the Finance Department. And try to be brief but thorough. And a long night already. So we are a fairly small department. We have 11 and a half or 12 employees, depending on how you want to count them, that do all the functions of the Finance Department. In tonight's presentation, we're going to be focusing on these functional areas of Finance Department itself, General Fund revenues, Welfare Department, and then touch really briefly on anticipated grants and what's happening with the TIF districts. We have 6 functional areas within the department, and I'm going to go back and forth as we talk as to whether welfare is its own department or part of finance. For the purposes of this slide, we're considering it all one department with a welfare component to that. We have the fiscal division, first of all, and we have about 3.5 employees in that division assigned there. They do all the payables, all the receivables, except for the school department, of course, and they handle their own. They process payroll, again, except for school and water department, and then complete all the monthly reports, the annual reports, prepare the budget, prepare the ACFR, is what we're calling it now. And then generally monitor 38 funds, 19 bonds, 31 bank accounts, about 40 grants right now. A lot of moving pieces to keeping the city in a sound fiscal direction and moving in the right place. And the folks in that part of the finance department do a great job on that. So I think we're lucky to have those folks. Personnel, we have 1.5 people assigned to that, and that is a full-time HR administrator and a payroll, kind of splitting that payroll person in between the fiscal and the personnel folks. They handle, of course, recruitment, separations, benefit management for all of the employees, employee safety, grievances, disciplinary actions, state and federal reporting. And of course, in the last, of course, well, I guess it's only been 2 years, but it seems longer than that, dealing with all the different COVID regulations and how that information gets presented to the employees and disseminated throughout the city. And, the joke within the department was the minute you set guidance on how to deal with COVID, they'll come out with new guidance. And keeping on top of that was Paul and her crew did a really good job of that. For calendar year 21, just to give perspective, there were 17 recruitment efforts resulting in 13 new hires. And of course, as both of the previous presenters have talked about today, dealing with the difficulty in finding good people today. It's still happening and we have a great workforce. But as you said, gone are the days when you can just put an ad in the paper and 20 good people show up vying for the job. So that's an increasing challenge. And last year, surprisingly, we had about 90 workers' compensation claims filed, which is almost double what we normally do. And the reason for that, again, is COVID related. Whenever there was a potential COVID exposure, we filed it. Now, not all those potential exposures actually resulted in COVID, but it did result in more paperwork going from us down to the insurance company. And that was dealt with within this division last year. Purchasing function, grand total of 1 person, dealing with all the RFPs, RFQs, and bids for the city, of which totaled 51 during 2021. Also managing contracts, leases, routine purchasing, and property and liability claims, of which we had 32 last year. 32 claims filed with the with our insurance company, and that is somebody runs into a light pole or somebody runs into a cruiser. Those kind of claims is what go through the purchasing function. On the tax side, again, 1.5 person, since we now have a great new tax collector that we share with the clerk's department, 18,000 tax bills, plus about 1,400 sewer only bills, and the whole tax collection and tax lien process is coordinated through that function. The 2-person IT division manages our network, 120 users across 10 locations, does not include school or the police department. They manage their own functions. So that is just everything else within the city. Computers, security cameras, servers, cabling, all the ancillary units, credit card readers, printers, copies, et cetera, all runs through IT. Kind of the joke that we have with that is that if it plugs into the wall, it's IT. Those people get called for just about anything and everything, and they always step up for that. So that's good, including now the phone system that we just went over to our new Voip phone. I want to show you the phone that is now in this building. This is it. We got rid of the probably 5 or 6 different phone systems that the city use, consolidated that all into one system, which is now run over the computer cables and is saving the city several $1,000s a year in money that we used to pay out for those phones. Of course, the primary, in addition to that, what we focus on with IT is functionality, taking advantage of changing technologies, and of course, security. Security is the big thing and things that people are very rightfully concerned about in that area. And we've been focusing on that the next year and will continue to do so. I'm going to leave off talking about welfare at this point since we're going to get to that later.
I'm going to jump in and add one more thing about the phones that we think is really adding value to our residents is now any staff has the ability to transfer a phone call to another building, where in the past, if somebody wanted to call with a question about why their trash didn't get picked up, when I come to Nancy in my office and she couldn't transfer it to Public Works, she'd have to say, let me give you that number. And now with one click, boom, the person doesn't even know that they're there and it's seamless for them. So it's great how we can interconnect with all of the buildings right now just by pushing a couple buttons on the extension. So I think our residents are truly going to benefit from that as well.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep, no problem. A lot of recent changes lately. We've had the departure for, many different reasons of a lot of our long-term employees in personnel, purchasing, IT, and treasurer. Just kind of a natural turnover in that regard. But when you look at that and you think of a division that only has 11 and a half people, that's a big percentage wise. We had a transfer of Lindsay Allen from tax up to personnel, which is doing a great job. Of course, we brought on Katie as a new hire, and forgive me for this. We also brought in Diane Clary as our new treasurer, who's doing a great job in that regard. And then we currently have both an IT specialist and a personal purchasing specialist that are currently vacant. So a lot of changes for a small department.
Who took John Gardner's place?
Well, right now I do.
Look like John.
That's right. That's a fairly recent change. Not fairly recent. It is a recent change earlier this month. So that is one of the positions that is out. We're advertising for now, but in the interim you're looking at. So there you go. As
Appreciate
far as
John's work
looking,
over the years.
Absolutely.
what's that? Excuse me.
He said he appreciated John's work over the years.
Oh,
Absolutely.
John did a fantastic job for the city, and
He-
he is missed. I actually was talking to him today as part of a transition and floated the idea of him doing his day job during the day and coming to Laconia on nights and weekends, but for some reason he did not want to pick up on that. So, looking backwards on FY '22, I think a couple of things that we did that was really I'm proud of is the work that we did in the IT security, both in the training regards as far as making sure that employees are up to speed on what is safe and what is not, and also just improving the overall network to try to make it a little much more secure. Mentioned the transition to the Voip phone system, also talking about security. The one hacking thing that we did have several years ago was actually into the phone system, not into the computer system. And now that is no longer possible because of the changes we did to the phone system. So we're good with that. We successfully managed some of the department transitions we had talked about earlier in the personnel area, in the tax area and such. As you know, we started out the year by resolving the imbalance with the internal service fund that had been existing for many, many years. So we've got that straightened out, and we're addressing other audit recommendations with that. Again, as I look at this, there's always something more. And I think talking about with the accomplishments is, again, coming back to COVID and coming back to managing that on an HR personnel issue as far as us, and also financial. Although I think what we see with currently COVID is that we're seeing more COVID response that is more targeted towards specific departments, a fire or DPW COVID program or a welfare COVID program, as opposed to a general COVID program that you saw more so of that in the beginning of the pandemic. Getting into the highlights of what you see actually as far as the dollars in the budget book. I'm just going to go through it very briefly and probably not ask you to page through the hymnal, but if you want to do that, I mean, of course, we're ready to answer questions on that. On the fiscal side of things, which is basically the meat of the budget for everything but welfare and IT. We're seeing an increase of about $17,000 driven by two things. And the main one of that is the audit costs. We have a new 5-year audit contract. 6 years ago when we went out to bid, surprise, surprise, we got much better numbers than we did when we went out to bid this year. So you're seeing the, that is hitting the budget. And in a small department, that's a big number. And then also you're seeing a cost for a paperless billing fee that actually there's a fee in there that has been in the contract since 2017. And that is currently being implemented in that to the tune of about $10,000 per year. And this is the first year that is included in the budget with that.
Could you explain that just a little bit?
It's a surcharge that is put on by there's a company called iCloud that manages the fees charged primarily with the kiosks. The money goes into iCloud and there's a certain percentage that is that we're contracted to pay. And frankly, that percentage, to be honest, was in there for many years, and neither party was implementing it. Well, we start getting a call from the credit card company that says, we're going to start putting this fee in place. We, of course, go scurrying to the contract and say, yes, it is there. And so we started paying for that. So there we go. Going to kind of put the next two together, retirement and health insurance, both on page 50. Retirement, of course, there was no change to retirement rates this year. And health insurance, so retirement is tracking with the change in salaries. Health insurance is, of course, up to due to the rate increase of just over 7% that is budgeted in the budget. Other insurance, and by that I mean property liability insurance, unemployment insurance, workers' comp insurance, it's pretty tracking at a fairly even, and no major ratings, no major changes there. Principal and interest, debt payments. We're seeing a decrease at that, at that point. We're glad to say that there were 2 bonds this year that have fallen off the table because the final payments are in 2022, will not be carried over into 2023. And we can look forward to that continuing over the next several years. We have, they get 6 more due to retire within the next 2 years, which we're very happy about. On the IT side, we're seeing an increase of about $20,000 due to 2 major things driving that. One is what we call the Firehouse software that the fire department uses to track their calls. They input their calls. And frankly, it's a very old system that is much in need of an update. And I believe it's been at least 10 years since there's been any change to the software. Well, now there's a change. And that cost is going from about $2,000 a year up to about $14,000 a year, which frankly is probably where it should have been to get the functionality we need. So it's just kind of a periodic step up with that. The other, there's about a there's a $10,000 increase. The servers we bought 3 years ago had 3 years of warranty built into the purchase price, but we're now in year 4. And so that is hitting us, and that's what's driving the IT changes.
Go back to. When's the last time we went out to bid on our audit? I can't remember.
2 years ago. This is the first year of a 5-year audit that we're in now, 5-year contract. So that goes out about every 5 years.
I guess next time I'd like to have the council be involved in that.
Sure. Definitely do. I will say the audit firms, frankly, they're in the same place we are. And it seems to have gone through cycles. I've been through this a couple of times, and you'll put out an RFP for audit services and you'll get one response. 5 years later, you'll put out the same RFP and you'll get half a dozen firms responding. We're now in the place where I think the audit companies are like, well, they're in the same place we are as far as trying to find staff, and that's not a good place to be in, but definitely we can do that. Any other questions before?
We already committed to that next. Are we already committed to the contract? I mean, the contract's done for the next 5 years.
That's correct. That's correct. There are certain performance standards within the contract. That will probably be a different discussion for a different time. be happy to have that with, have that conversation.
Go ahead.
Anything? Good? Okay. Looking forward to next year, there's certain things we want to focus on. And of course, keeping a focus on security and IT security enhancements. I will say we do have a pending grant application that we have worked with Chief Biati on that will use available COVID ARPA monies to take us the next step as far as allowing for segregation of our data on different servers, et cetera, et cetera. And we're hoping that that will be our next big leap forward. Returning to full staff. As we mentioned earlier, we're in recruitment for a IT person, for a purchasing person. And all of that actually is not a situation we want to be in, but at the same time, it provides for a good opportunity to look at our functionality and see what we can do to make ourselves a little more efficient. Along those regards, we're taking a hard look at upgrading our recruitment efforts. Meaning, of course, what we have heard mostly in the public safety side, but also in DPW, and Dean referred tonight, is that and I just mentioned, it's getting hard to find good candidates. And the kind of out of the box thinking that we've seen and applied in different situations, I think we need to look at applying those more globally. Gone are the days when you can just slap an ad in the paper and trust that something good is going to happen. So we're going to be looking at that, for citywide over the next year. Review fixed assets. There was the need to do that was touched upon in the audit report. So we're looking at that and adjusting to a post-COVID world in the area of welfare, which we'll get to when we get to the welfare slides. But that's a thing we're interested in. That kind of wraps up where we are with the finance part of things. And if there's no questions, we'll move on to revenues, which I'm just going to cover from a very, very broad perspective. I think Scott might touch on this more in his presentation. I'll say overall, the revenue projections increased by about 10%. And you'll see if you look on page 54, there's probably about 60, 70 different lines that contribute to that bottom line. And each one has of course, its own thing going on there. The major drivers are motor vehicle registration fees, which continue to be very strong. Charges for services in both police extra duty and solid waste disposal. Now, of course, within those areas, there's associated increased costs. So what we're doing here, looking at this, is just looking at the revenue side and going through that bottom line number on the revenue side with that. And then miscellaneous revenue, there's a transfer from the health stabilization account to offset that increase in health insurance that we've seen. And of course, there's dozens of other smaller changes throughout there on the various lines. But those are the big drivers in this regard.
How large is the transfer from the health stabilization account?
$120,000.
How much?
$120,000.
It was the balance 170 today.
That sounds about right. I was about 180, but that's, yep, that's.
And I guess we're proposing to do that based on what we knew at the time. Is that going to be something we take a second look at based on potential lapse, carry forward kind of situation?
Yeah, we definitely will start looking at items that we're going to bring forward for carry forwards. I think that was some guidance we got from some of the counselors to use some of the reserve funds that we've built up over the years to help offset some of the budgetary impacts that taxpayers might pay. So knowing that we had about a 9.25% increase in health insurance, it seemed to use 120,000 to offset that. I think it's the first time we've actually pulled money out of that account for the 10 years we've done it. So it's not like we've run to that well every year to help offset spending. So the 120,000 was presented in the budget, and I can go through it when we get to that revenue page during my presentation. But certainly if things shake out either within our finances or things are still fluid, as you know, in the legislature right now as well.
I guess that'd be one I'd Not that we shouldn't take any out of it, but
Don't steal my thunder until I get to my presentation, Counselor. That's the big close for tonight.
sorry.
Well, I'm going to stay to the end of the meeting now. Any other questions on revenues before we move on? Okay. Welfare, real brief. It's required under RSA 165 that we provide interim emergency assistance to those unable to provide for themselves. I'll just say right now, bottom line is there are no major changes to welfare proposed in the budget that's in front of you. Provide a little perspective as to what's happening. We have within calendar year 2021, 243 contacts, down from 301 in 2020. And the change is, in my mind, attributable to all the other programs that have arisen in relation to COVID that give people other places to go and other safety nets. Those 243 contacts resulted in 72 vouchers written over the year, about the same as what we had in 2020. If you ask, well, what happened to the rest of the folks? There are people who come and apply for welfare who are not eligible. We do the math and we do the personal budget, and the bottom line is what it is. Other folks are helped through referral to our partner agencies, and so they did not result in having a voucher written. The chart there kind of shows where we spend our money. Rough numbers, 3/4 of what we spend is in some way related to housing. Of the rest, the biggest chunk is burial for indigent peoples. And that is, of course, required under statute, and that's where we go. Then a small amount for transportation, which you don't see here, are medications, food, clothing, because our partner agencies actually do cover that so well that very few people come to us and rely on the city for those. Interesting chart is here as far as quarterly welfare expenses. Blue line are expenses by quarter going back to 2017. Red line is the reimbursement that we receive for those expenses. And paying attention to this area right here, what you can see is our Cdbg COVID reimbursement grant, where expenses, as Scott has pointed out in several of his monthly reports, expenses are going up, but much of that is reimbursed through the COVID grant. And so those grant monies can be used throughout the end of this calendar year. And I know there is some talk and some proposals at the state level about getting additional funds to take us beyond December of 2022. The budget that's in front of you now is on the assumption that about the same time that the COVID need expires, the COVID reimbursement expires. So of course, at this point, the crystal ball won't tell us whether that's really going to happen, but that's the assumption that's in the budget. Touching really briefly on anticipated grants, which I believe is on page 7 of the budget. These are the grants that have been reported to the finance department by various other departments as having the potential for being awarded this year. And of course, this will be included in the budget public hearing and such. If you have any questions or about any of these grants in particular, be happy to either reach out to me and I can contact the department head or reach out directly about any of those possible grants. And now the easiest one from my regard is about what's happening with the TIFs. And the answer is not nothing, but what I'll say is no changes in what's happening in the TIFs right now. All three are pretty well moving along. The downtown TIF, of course, is paying off some debt service, paying for the security cameras in the parking garage. Weirs is paying off debt service, and my understanding is Lakeport is getting up and running. But as far as fiscally, there's no changes in the TIFs districts for this year. And that concludes the presentation. Any questions or?
Glenn, I think going back to TIF, ordinarily we see, I think it's the Weirs in a negative position, right? On our.
The Weirs is in a negative position. That'll change a lot through the year. And the reason, of course, the Weirs, the TIF district gets its big pot of money at the beginning of the year, every July. And then the expenses exceed that. So you'll see within a year, a positive expense gradually moving more and more into the negative. Now, across the years, what you'll see is that the amount of that negative balance is gradually being eaten away. And I believe we're now at a point where about 5 years from now, that negative balance will go into the positive.
We're ahead of where we thought we'd be, right?
Actually, turn to the last page in your budget book, and that was one of my notes, but since we're on TIF, I can show you, and for those who were on the council at the time, which I think is probably only Councilor Littman and Councilor Hamel, who's not here tonight, when the big road construction project in the Weirs happened, the bread and butter, if you will, the meat and potato were paid for out of the general fund, and all the nice to haves that people wanted to do for the bump outs and the stamped concretes and the ornamental lighting and putting utilities underground, all were paid for from the TIF, but the Weirs TIF was new and didn't have the money then. So we kind of carried that as a balance with a due to, due from, and we knew we were going to be in arrears for a few years on that with a pro forma. The other thing that came as a wild card is the cost to put all the utilities underground took a sizable hit, of which Eversource ate the lion's share. And we negotiated that we would make three $50,000 payments to them for a total of $150,000. So if you look under the Weirs TIF, you can see somewhere it says Eversource, and this year we have 0 going to Eversource, meaning we paid off those three $50,000 payments, which hurt. So the simple math, we're 132 in the hole to start. We're anticipated to get 170. And the bond payment is 108. So really 2 years, we should be back at the break even roughly on it, which does, as Councilor Littman said, put us ahead of schedule. And that was with taking on an additional 150,000 with those three $50,000 payments that we weren't anticipating at the time we had put that pro forma together. So it's really performed well, and we probably should be at a break even point, roughly 2 to 3 years.
And exactly where does that TIF district cover? What does it cover?
There's a map. We'll send you
pressing,
I think it's basically, it covers either side of the channel a little bit. So it goes into the Dexter shoes, I'll refer to it, post office, Vita parking lot area, comes across the channel, encompasses the drive-in, goes all the way down Lakeside, and it might run up Route 3 a little bit more to some of the areas, but
Okay, that's
it's
good.
concentrated in
Yeah.
that general area.
Okay.
But I'll send you the link to the map that's on the website.
And since we're looking at this page, excuse me for this, I said there's not a lot of changes. So there's not any changes fiscally going on. Maybe you put together a book like this, and of course, the minute it goes to press, you think, oh, darn, I missed something. On this page where it says prior increment is 120,000, the prior year increment was actually 170,000. So there's no change in the increment going in this year. That's a typo in the book, so we'll fix that. So it's not that the amount of the increment is increasing by $50,000 this year.
But again, we think it's performing well in terms of what we had projected on that, and
Okay.
even taking the additional debt. So, and that was before Glenn's time, so he didn't have all of that institutional knowledge like is sometimes stuck in my head.
Well, I will do an extraction of that before
Right.
September.
Quick question on the downtown TIF in terms of where we see we are with respect to that in the Colonial in terms of what's come on board. Because I think we were pretty conservative in establishing that TIF too.
Yeah, so some of those numbers, as you know, the assessing year just ended, so they'll start working those through. We won't necessarily have them for this budget, but that'll be calculated for the increase over base into the next year. Similar with Lakeport too. A lot of that is just now going to be tallied. That goes into the calculations that go to DRA for September timeframe that turn into the second half of the year tax bills. So a little bit of lag time, but yes.
Would another way of saying it be that we're ahead there too? you think?
Yes.
Councilor Cheney.
Another time, I don't have a question, but a comment. I've seen the effort the city's made in terms of IT security, and I'm happy to see the effort made, but I hope you maintain that level of IT security and hopefully increase it. As one who served in an agency who relied on IT almost exclusively, I watched how quickly people find a way to get into your house.
Absolutely.
It's an area where we shouldn't scrimp IT security. And if you see something, in the middle of the year that looks like a potential problem, I hope you'll come back to us for help. you know, to deal with some invasion.
Is this before Dean gets his raise or after?
So I'm still working on the manager's raise. I haven't gotten there yet.
Absolutely. And actually, the next thing we're going to be focusing on is that we have a good system in place. But it's got a lot of different components to it, and we have a lot of different firewalls within the different structures. Well, there's an opportunity being raised now with the new fiber opportunities that we have between buildings to consolidate all of that into one, so that there's no longer multiple points of entry into the city, and we can try to control that. And that's where we're going to be putting our focus into next. In addition to just keeping up, as you know, the largest threat factor or weak point in any IT security are the users. And so we've got a very robust training system in response there. All new employees, all current employees twice a month. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to jinx anything, but we're going to continue with those.
And in addition, we work with an outside consultant right now to come in to get a different set of eyes who comes in and offers guidance to us. We formed, what are we calling it, an IT incident response team that's meeting quarterly. We actually, with the help of Chief Biotti and our partners at Primex, who use a company called the Atom Group, who are security gurus in the state, and that's part of our liability insurance through our insurance carrier now, as you can well imagine. We did, I believe it was the first tabletop drill for about 3 hours here. Unfortunately, the timing was they scheduled it for a Friday afternoon, and we got hit hard with the scenario we didn't know and went through and felt we were vulnerable at the end. And at least I went home and was depressed all weekend. And I said, who the heck scheduled this for a Friday afternoon to leave us in a bad mood? But, you know, out of that, you know, we've done things. We've started doing simple things like training 2 or 3 people in each building to say, you know, if something happens and it's going to happen at 2 a.m, you know, what buildings are occupied? Well, police and fire. And how do we get a call to someone there to idiot proof it? And I don't mean anybody's an idiot, but pull the blue cord, you know, and it's identified and it's done in the buildings that we've got 24. Simple things like who's got keys and access to the buildings to get in and do that, you know. If you don't have a key, throw a rock through the window. I'd rather have you break a window than, you know, lose data and stuff. So we're working these things, but with outside consultants, and Primex has really stepped up as they should because of some of the things that municipalities are being targeted with. You know, I echo your comments that Glenn has taken this up to the next level, and we continue to put focus on it.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Scott, you want to push off till next week? or-
Yeah, that's just had enough for me. I can do this in 17 minutes. We'll play, name that tune. How many minutes can you do this in? So I am going to have you kind of flip through because I looked at what I was going over, and it was assessing and elections and milfoil, and I didn't know if I could find any fancy slides like the chief had and all his stuff. So I will have you just flip through and go through the high points of the administrative oversight. I really want to start you on page 5 and just that bottom graph on page 5. It's a real simple one. But I think it puts a little dynamic to it. And I showed you this, or at least I spoke to this during my budget presentation way back in April, which I'm sure you've all taped and are watching weekly. But this really shows the high point of how much we used of surplus.
Only twice.
Only twice? Okay. You know, close to $1.3 million was being used out of our undesignated fund balance or our rainy day account just to help offset taxes. And I mentioned the incremental steps that we've taken to wean ourselves on the use of our piggy bank, if you will. And I think that just shows it what little steps and staying the course can do. And that's a credit to all the councils who've stuck the course and continue to do that. So turning to page 9, this is my office, Nancy and I, a 2-person office. Really, you've got a $3,000 increase in the overall budget, and things are just pretty much status quo in there. So no major changes there. Page 12 is capital. I'm going to rehand this document out that I've given you all when I presented the budget, but I think this ties in a little easier to read, not only the capital, but some of the carry forward funds. And then as Councilor Lippman just alluded to, what we might be carrying forward at the end of this fiscal year. The ARPA funds that we got in August of 21 and the ARPA funds that we're anticipated to be receiving in August of 22. So the only change on this whole sheet, and this is again trying to stay current with legislation, is the street number should now read the 1.5 million. It didn't get updated when I updated in the budget. And that's strictly because in some of the state surplus with the bill that Councilor Lippman was watching that got completely hijacked, and it went from Medicaid birthing rate increases to streets, bridges, and body worn cameras. All right, it took a complete 180. So we're anticipated that another $30 million was being distributed through the current gas tax formula to the local level, which puts about another $250,000 to us for targeted for streets. So that's really 1.5 million, which brings our total cash capital in the budget that you have to $2 million. The rest of those items on these streets are all kind of the recurring nuts and bolts items that I wanted to leave in the budget because you're going to see them probably next year and the year after. It's sidewalk money and bridge maintenance money and drainage design and playground upgrades and all that stuff. So all that stuff remains in the budget. A couple of the ones that when the numbers are lightly shaded in gray, if we had a color printer in my office, which Glenn won't give me, they would be yellow for you, but we've got to deal with the little gray tone there. You already funded lifeguard chairs, the new gazebo at the Weirs Beach water access. Also on the right-hand column, the Riverwalk repairs, which we've awarded that contract, in the police communication recorder. We've got remaining ARPA funds, that $314,000. I've shifted back to the left column again. Those funds are sitting there and available now. I didn't want to kind of jump the gun and bring you that resolution again before you had a second view of how all the capital is working, but those are the recommendations there. And then what we would be proposing at this point when we stand for the ARPA funds that are coming in August of this calendar year, but fiscal year 23, that $867,000. And there's the list of projects there, which still leaves about $185,000 remaining that could be targeted for something unknown at this point, that or something additional. So that's the capital in a nutshell. All the descriptions of all the projects are run from page 13.
Scott, I'm sorry. So what remains available is $314,015.
Yep.
That also available plus the 185 that anticipated.
No, the 314,000 you mentioned sitting there today.
Right.
So if we said, hey, let's pull the trigger on ambulance equipment and a Bond Beach bathhouse improvements and water access and a DPW plotter and get a resolution on for Monday night and let's appropriate that money, that could happen. The money's sitting there now. The total ARPA funds that are coming in August are in the bolded number on the right column, the 867,000. We haven't spent any of that yet because we haven't received it.
Right.
My recommendations fall underneath that, and that adds up to 682,000. So if you accepted all of my recommendations, you still have another $185,000 sitting there. That wouldn't be spoken for.
So this is right. So I guess going back to my question, maybe I had to make it clear. On the right, the 867 is anticipated right
Yes.
now.
Yep.
If we spend according to this recommendation, leaves us with 185.
Yep.
But go back to the 314. Is the 314 still in-house essentially?
Yes.
And
Yep.
can be spent?
Yes,
Okay.
that's money ready to go
Gotcha.
today.
Gotcha.
The other money shows up in August.
Okay. Right.
So the second 867 would not be part of the budget process. Once that money shows up from the ARPA funds, then we could start spending that one on capital projects.
Mhm.
I guess one consideration is looking at the Opeachy track and sort of looks like it's approaching its. I know you have something in there about building roof, but the track itself gets shown somewhere.
I don't have the full 6-year CIP in front of me, but I think that might be slated for a project next year where we do some of the more significant sealing and updating and stuff to it. But I believe that's in the 6-year CIP, not for this year, but it might be slated next year, but I can confirm that for you.
That'd be great.
Page 21 of your budget, there are placeholders. These would be 2 projects that we would look to debt finance if they receive final council approval. One is parking garage renovation, 120,000 basically would be a partial year's worth of interest. And then we put a placeholder in, again, if the city is going to move forward with automation at some point over the next year, we're looking to bond toters, and that's going to be somewhere in the $700,000
Page
range.
is that
So
again. I saw
you're on
that.
page 21.
Great. Yep.
So again, these are not locked and loaded. These still are waiting for council direction and guidance, but we plugged in placeholders if you go that direction. Stop me anytime you like. We're gonna go one page over, page 23. These are called non-departmental items. The main changes here in the middle numbers, you can see contingency. So we have $50,000 in contingency dollars built into this budget on page 23. And then at the very bottom, you can see colonial lease and colonial operations. We are fully funded with both those expenses, where we had delayed a little bit, where the colonial opening got delayed and we didn't take ownership of it until basically end of June last year, July 1st, versus the target date originally was January. So we were able to carry some funds forward because we didn't start paying rent on it and those types of things. But as of now, everything that we're obligated for regarding our lease payments, our debt service, and our stipend to Spectacle Management is 100% fully built into the budget with the adoption of this budget. Turning one more page to page 25. Major changes here on the special items is we've increased the milfoil budget that Dean spoke of earlier from its current level of $30,000 up to $40,000, so a $10,000 increase. And again, we leverage some state matching grants and also some private fundraising grants to go into share those costs. Other changes are the senior center contribution is up by $3,000 from 20 to 23, and cost of fireworks is up, so we're up $1,000 for the Celebrate Laconia fireworks downtown, or the city's fireworks downtown, as well as up $1,000 for the Weirs Beach fireworks. But overall, it was a $20,000 increase, and that's what's driving it, with a lion's share being milfoil. Page 34 is assessing. That became a contracted function probably about 4 years ago. We use Whitney Consulting, Steve Hamilton's firm. We've been very pleased with the performance. So we have our assessor is in the building usually a couple of times a week. We have 3 other folks in assessing, our assistant assessor, and then 2 technicians. One is in the office, and one does primarily the field work with not only sales, but also in the just the rotational cyclical reviews that we try to get to 20% of the properties every year. And I think I've spoken to you this at a couple of meetings, and that way we stay current with moving the needle a little bit, as opposed to doing what's referred to as a full-blown revaluation, where they do it every 5 years or longer, and all of a sudden people are in an uproar because their values all go up in 1 year, even though we all know the tax rate means nothing, and because your value goes up doesn't mean your bill goes up. But when you see your value go from 200,000 to 300,000 in 1 year, I think you'd rather see it, go up a little bit. Steve and I have had some conversations. So there's no real changes. There's no changes in the staffing, just increases in wages and the contract costs. So assessing is up $11,000 overall in the budget. Steve and I have chatted, and as you follow the real estate market in our area and the whole country, we saw some jumps last year, predominantly about 6% on average, but some types of property, waterfront, water access, certain classes, maybe condominiums, saw bigger increases just based on market-driven conditions. Just very preliminarily looking at some rough data from closing the assessing year this year on March 31st. We're going to be taking another sizable bite at assessments again, just based on everything that's happened for the last 12 months. And again, as we all know, when the values went up, our tax rate dropped. So again, it doesn't mean that your bill necessarily goes up. But we're probably going to schedule Steve to come in probably sometime in the July or August timeframe, just to talk a little bit about preliminarily what he's seeing. He suggested that we may want to do some mailers to property owners, just to give them kind of the heads up and a chance to come in and talk through where we're at with individual properties before we get bills mailed and that type of stuff. So trying to be proactive, but again, I don't have to tell you the market's been hot. It may be cooling a little bit now, just with, as Dean pointed out, price of materials or interest rates going up, but that all took place basically post April 1st. So when we locked the data in on the sales comps freezes on March 31st, and those prior 12 months were a gangbuster year. Positive thing is people are seeing equity, numbers increase in what for most people is their major asset in their home. So
401ks keep going down.
I can only speak through March 31st, Counselor. So that's assessing. We'll dig into a little bit on revenue that Glenn touched on page 54. The biggest changes here, we'll go down into maybe the second chunk of numbers there that's listed as shared revenues and additional rooms and meals tax. That increase basically came from the state starting to share 30% of the rooms and meals collection with the local levels. Not quite the 40 that they were obligated to way back when it first started, but far better than the 20%. And they've added and adjusted the numbers. So this year we were targeting an increase of $1,150,000. You can see there from last year to $1,260,000. We've actually bumped it up again to $1,290,000. So those numbers continue to be strong. Two numbers down from that, that's where that extra $250,000 that I mentioned in the additional highway funds shows up under that highway block grant number. If for some reason that doesn't come out of committee of conference and the governor doesn't sign it, which I'm not anticipating that happening, but you never know because it's property tax relief for communities. We would just back $250,000 in revenue out of that item and drop the street paving budget back to the $1,250,000 where we had started with it. So that would be a change there if something doesn't come to fruition out of the legislature. In the third block of numbers going down, motor vehicle permit fees is the top one. Again, we continue to be pleasantly surprised that those numbers continue to exceed expectations. So we've shown a $200,000 increase in motor vehicle registration for next year. Going down into the big chunk of numbers down towards the bottom of page 54. In the middle there, you'll see a number of solid waste items. The recommendation through the Public Works Committee was to increase the tipping fee to maintain equity with our cost of what we're paying to haul and dispose of tonnage at the incinerator. And now we switched over to turnkey landfill in Rochester for slightly better rates going there. So we have factored in an increase in revenue. Most noticeably, it'll be under the solid waste trash C. That's the commercial haulers coming in. So this would not impact the average Laconia resident who might go up there and drop off 50 pounds or 75 pounds of trash from their vehicle. This would be the commercial hauling tipping fee. Obviously, the majority of Laconia residents get curbside pickup, so there's no increase necessarily to them directly for the curbside pickup, although we are seeing that expense, and you'll see that in the solid works budget when Wes does present that. On the top of the next page, based on council action at the last meeting, you can see second line down, parking kiosk Lakeside. The $180,000 number far to the right was based on the parking fees going from $1 an hour to $1.25 an hour. So that's now up to $2 an hour. So we'll be amending, I'll be bringing you a proposal to amend that revenue to increase it to reflect what $2 an hour generates in revenue versus $1.25. So to Councillor Lippman's other point, and you can see in the large bunch of numbers there, second from the bottom, transfer from health stabilization fund, 120,000. If we bump up the kiosk revenue, then maybe we don't need to take it all or any part or any of the money out of the health insurance stabilization account, because now there's an increase in revenue there that has just been identified since we printed the budget. So those are the kinds of moving things that we'll keep compiling and work with you and bring you updates as we go along.
Go right ahead.
The second section down on page 55, is that in lieu of taxes? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so those are payment in lieu of taxes. So that's Laconia Housing, a few of the senior housings, Taylor Community, the skate club. Those are the biggies that are in there. So it's a payment in lieu of taxes.
Is there a formula? I'm looking at Taylor Home specifically. Is there a formula that determines that? I mean,
Yep.
they could.
That was established well before my time, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the formula. I believe that Councilor Lippman may help me with this. Didn't that go to the Supreme Court about a nonprofit, and they were victorious in doing that? So every year we get, it's based on number of units. It's only for the properties on the campus, so it's none of their maintenance buildings and that type of stuff or anything they might have bought on your street. Well, I'm drawing the blank of the name on.
I mean, the homes they're pulling up there, from what I've been told by some of the residents that have spoken to me about that whole thing, they pay the regular taxes on those homes.
Not on the main campus for the,
No, on the street.
on the street, they're paying full taxes. On anything like they just built 4 or 6 new cottages up in the last year or two. So those tie into a formula. It ties into the rates that they're charging. It ties into their occupancy level. And we've reflected, I think those cottages, they refer to them as cottages, I believe. I think they came online already a year ago at this time. And if so, you would have seen that reflect from 293,000 we budgeted for their pilot and last year, and this year we're up to 315. So that's
So
what the
they
reflection is.
supply you with the, the formula, how they did it, and then.
Absolutely. They supply us with an occupancy rate on a date certain, and we take it on that date, and we look at their current rack rates and all that type of stuff, and assessing has been very much on top of that. The other item that's hanging out there again through the committee of conference is there were 2 competing bills on the state contributing towards the local cost of retirement system for police, fire, and which are in group 2, and the teachers in group 1, whereas the state used to contribute 35%. They weaned off of that between 2011 and 2013, and they aren't paying anything towards the local share now for those groups. One bill was to try to get the state permanently back in to contribute 7.5%. That one didn't get out of the Senate interim study or an expedient to legislate. With some surplus dollars, there's a separate bill that is using that same dollar amount of 7.5%, but being a one-time payment to the community. So we're monitoring that. If that comes to fruition, that'll be another one of these revenues that we didn't know about when we put the budget book together, but we're watching it, and we'll keep it on our scorecard and kind of bring you the update as to how all of these legislative items shake out and what the impact is to Laconia. The other thing Council Lippman brought to my attention today is there's a bill to increase the Medicaid reimbursement rate tied to the Medicare rate for ambulance runs, which if passed is effective July 1 and could generate some additional dollars in our Medicaid billing in the EMS account. So all these things, we're watching, but really we should have a good sense. I think committee of conference has to be done by the end of May, and generally speaking, there's probably a fairly good indication of, what's going to, get signed by the governor and what maybe gets a red flag and a little bit of warning type of thing. But so we'll wait and see. But those are the types of things we're still watching in the revenues, even though it's not a state budget year. So a lot of moving parts.
So now we got money to give to the fire chief more.
Glenn, did you get any money out of this tonight? Is nothing?
Well, we'll work on it later.
You're definitely not getting on the finance.
Boy, I should have gone first in the presentations if I knew we were giving money out by who presented.
Yeah, but there's a retention policy.
All right, so I think those are the revenues I wanted to touch. Legal budget, again, we contract with Mitchell Municipal Group across the parking lot here, page 67. I really got to say that with staff and people being smart and not keeping us out of trouble, when you look at the trend of what we paid in legal going back to fiscal year 18, under 70,000, under 50,000, under 90,000, our total legal budget this year is proposed to be 102,000, and that projects a small increase just in the cost of contracting for services. So the whole team really is judicious with how they use legal, and the big ones that drive it for us, if we have any litigation, our general retainer costs are fixed for the basic nuts and bolts that we do. So keep out of trouble, but that's worked out really well. I was going to make Katie get up and give a 12-minute presentation on the budget, which she wasn't part of putting together, but I told her I'd give her a pass this year and I would do it. So the records city clerk is on 96. Again, as Glenn had already mentioned, we're splitting that salary now into 2 departments. So part of it shows up in tax, part of it shows up in clerk. So that's really the biggest change. A couple other increases in some of the cost with motor vehicle registrations and that type of stuff, but nothing significant. Elections on page 99, that's just driven by how many elections we're targeted to have. This year, we have a state primary and then the general election in November. So we've got 2 elections that we're aware of for this year, and hopefully no surprise special election. So that's the only change there. We went over the TIFs and motorcycle week budget. We factored in the increase in the licensing fees that the council approved a month or two ago to, include the Friday and raise the rate. So that shows a bump up there. And what we had hoped was a one-time bump in the porta potty chemical toilets from COVID. We went out to bid. We got 2 responses. I'm going off the top of my head, Glenn, I think we got 2 responses. We retargeted 5 or 6 other people who didn't respond and sent them links and called them and asked them to respond. And we ended up getting the same 2 responses, and one of them went up a little higher from their first response. So 25,000 is really the new cost for porta potties, when just 3 short years ago, it was a $4,000 or $5,000 number. Don't ask me why. But that's the major increase, both in the revenue and on the expense side for Motorcycle Week. So that's my rundown, and happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for the city manager? You sure, Bruce?
I want to get out of here, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Something I
Scott.
said?
No?
Thank you very much to everyone who contributed.